say this without a whole lot of charity in my heart, last and really least in every way, was an unusually powerful but little-known congressman from Mississippi named Pickering. Pickering transformed American life in the 1990s when he orchestrated the 1996 Telecommunications Act, a massive privatization of the airwaves that led to the creation of media monopolies, the destruction of a lot of local radio stations, really the worst thing that happened to my business journalism in a long, long time. No one really paid attention to Chip. He got actually more bad press than that for an initiative, Broadcast Decency Act, which was going to try and give Congress the power to take a station off the air for one naughty word. That didn't pass, it wasn't going to pass, but it sure pleased the folks back home in Mississippi. No one paid attention to the Telecommunications Act, which had deprived them, essentially, in many ways, of a free press. And I bring that up because as I talk about these men and talk about these stories and we talk about religious authority, we always want to remember that the real dangers, the dangers when it goes upon hurting us in our own lives but abroad, is when people take these ideas and, as the family does, and say these are injunctions not just for how I should live, but how others should live, and not just the so-called social issues, but the economic issues. That kind of privatization of the airways was experienced within this organization as a religious cause. Now, I'm getting into the sort of the dry, wonky legislative stuff of Chip Pickering, and most of you don't really know who Chip Pickering is, unless, has anyone here seen that movie Borat? Yeah. We got a few, good. Borat, Cultural Learnings of America for Make Benefit Glorious Nation of Kazakhstan, was a joke, in which Sacha Baron Cohen, as the idiot reporter Borat, makes his way to a revival meeting where Pickering takes the pulpit to proclaim himself a loyalist of the gathering and its truths, creationism and religious nationalism, America the Christian. America as a Christian nation, as a nation that has a specific Christian destiny that we ought to in fact be exporting to the rest of the world. America as a Christian was something all three men believed in or paid lip service to as part of the politics of fundamentalism. And I think it's important to make that distinction. I'm not here talking about fundamentalism, all the fine, decent, honest evangelicals and fundamentalists who live their lives, who understand pluralism and democracy. I'm talking about the politicized kind. I'm talking about this top-down religion. So all three paid lip service to this politics of fundamentalism, but they were united more than ideologically. They were united by this house, C Street. It's a red brick townhouse at Capitol Hill. 133 C Street, southeast, across from the Library of Congress, a block away from one congressional building and office buildings. It's near the Supreme Court. If you are in Washington and you're interested in this story, I suggest you stop by because C Street is exempt, tax exempt as a church, even though it fulfills none of the IRS's criteria for doing so. But if you want to stop by, please do. Say hello to Senator Ensign. The C Street house, or the Prey Boy Mansion, as some of the bloggers began to call it, is the Capitol Hill headquarters of this group that I'm talking about, the family. Senator Ensign lived in the C Street house. Governor Sanford retreated there for help in managing his wife, Jenny Sanford, when their marriage got on the rocks. And in her testimony, she describes the advice she got. She was sent to speak with the men of C Street, who told her that she should not in any way express dissatisfaction with her marriage to the governor. He had more important things to do. That it wasn't appropriate for him to be straying and so on, but that would be settled between the men. But meanwhile, she should not think of herself as unimportant. She had an incredibly important mission. She was to keep the governor sexually satisfied. This was the advice she was given. Her job was as a helpmeet to this man who'd been chosen by God for leadership. And then again, once again, last and really least, Congressman Chip Pickering, who not only lived in the C Street house, but he actually rendezvoused with his mistress there in the house, registered as a church. His mistress was a telecom heiress. He left Congress in 2008 to become a telecom lobbyist, in which cause he has worked with many more of his C Street brothers. Other residents of the C Street house, Senator Jim DeMint of South Carolina, much in the news these days as sort of the standard bearer of the Tea Party within the establishment. Senator Sam Brownback of Kansas, Republican of Kansas, is about to become governor of that state and is soon to be successor In the Senate, Representative Jerry Moran, Representative Zach Wamp of Tennessee, Senator John Boone of South Dakota. Maybe the most colorful is Senator Tom Coburn, the Oklahoma Republican infamous for proposing the death penalty for abortion providers. Senator Coburn is himself a doctor, and he and the Senator Ensign scandal helped Senator Ensign help his brother in Christ by arranging payments to the mistress's family, payments which are now subject of a Justice Department investigation. But Senator Coburn said that he had confidentiality. He didn't have to explain his role because he's a deacon in his church, so he has religious confidentiality. And he is a doctor. He was a doctor treating his brother, Senator Ensign. Coburn is an obstetrician, so we wait the happy announcement from Senator Ensign. Now, if all of these guys want to live together and pray together and seek spiritual solace together, that's fine. That's fine. That's the First Amendment freedom that protects us all. The issue becomes when they are living in a house that is subsidized by a private and extremely sectarian religious organization, and that organization has some transparency issues. Let me quote the leader of the group, a man named Doug Coe. The more invisible you can make your organization, the more influence it will have. This is true. This is why we have lobbying laws and disclosure laws, but in documents from within the organization at one point they considered registering as a Christian lobby, but the leader said, no, we'll have more effect if we can work behind the scenes. Now, the truth is, in Washington, there's a lot of groups like this. There's a lot of groups like this who try to get around lobbying laws and all that sort of thing. It is illegal in some cases, but it's so common, it's not often paid attention to. It's the nature of the influence. It's the nature of the influence that becomes important and makes this group worth studying. Let me again return to Doug Coe and thinking of that revelation back from 1935 about the top men. Here's Doug Coe describing one way to approach Jesus. You say, hey, Jesus said you got to put him before mother, father, brother, sister. And we know this is true, this is scriptural. Hitler, Lenin, Mao, that's what they taught the kids. Mao even had the kids killing their own mother and father. But it wasn't murder. It was for building the new nation, the new kingdom. Now, if this was a one-time thing, I would say that's a poor choice of words, but we all stumble over words sometimes. But in fact, it's a boilerplate within the organization, this idea. You see the ideological diversity, Hitler and Mao, he's not a fascist or a communist. What he is fetishizing is the strength, the authority. What this group in its early days began by calling the totalitarianism of Christ. When they look at Jesus, where others see a message of mercy or love or compassion, they see power. That's what they say is the common denominator. So they say the best way to help the weak is to help the strong, to find the strong man who exemplify this power and help them have more power so they can help the rest of us. Now, it should also be emphasized, these aren't neo-Nazis. That invocation of Hitler, and it's throughout their archives, and when you spend time with them, it's like a drumbeat. What would Hitler do? There's some video sermon. I worked with NBC Nightly News. We did a segment on this, and we got a hold of a sermon. Doug Coe describing to a group of evangelical leaders the great model for friendship that politicians should aspire to. Politicians should get together, as the founder said, beyond the din of the vox populi, this pretentious little phrase, beyond the voice of the people. They should get together beyond the voice of the people, a few guys together, in the age of minority control is what they say we're living in now. Where's a model for what kind of things we could do that? He says, look at Hitler, Goebbels, and Himmler. Bad guys, but look at what all they got accomplished. We could do this for Christ. So, when we aired that video on NBC, member of the organization, I should say they're secretive but not secret. Every now and then they'll say, boy, they came out, they want to say, look, that was just a metaphor. We're just using Hitler as a metaphor for Jesus. Hopefully there's someone in this room who can imagine a better metaphor. A man, maybe a lion, there's all sorts of possibilities. The problem, and this is where political fundamentalism goes wrong, the problem is when that metaphor becomes concrete. And in the sort of the silly and trivial example we see the idea that Senator Ensign is is selected for power, so we must help preserve him in power, so we're going to help with a financial cover-up of the affair. Well, that's undermining democracy. But the real danger, and the story I found in the archives, and then I've since with this new book been reporting in the present, the real danger is broader in scope, is when you take that idea and you combine it to American power. Remember this idea of America, the Christian with a special destiny. Let me just give you a couple of dates from the movement's history. 1959, which is when Doug Coe started working with them, when they first really started reaching out in the developing world, they had understood the Cold War earlier than most, called it World War III, with Washington as America's Christian capital. In 1959, two leaders of the organization, two senators, led a delegation of businessmen selected by God to review leaders for their compliance with God's will. They went to Haiti. Where there was a young up-and-coming leader. The two senators were on the Foreign Affairs Committee. They were trying to decide, is this a guy that we want to support? Is this a guy we want to put American muscle behind? And they did. They came back and they said, we've met God's man for Haiti. His name was Papadoc Duvalier. I remember him. He was perhaps the most lunatic killer in the Western Hemisphere who ruled Haiti mercilessly and horrendously and horrifically for years with staunch American support. That's what enabled him to do it. He's an odd choice for a man of God since he thought he was God. He was a practitioner of voodoo, and I don't mean that to disparage him because he gave voodoo a bad name. Ruling through the so-called Tonton Lacoutes, his sort of killing elite, a monster, God's man. That pattern they began repeating throughout the world. In 1966, Suharto came to power in Indonesia, one of the great oil producers of the world. Suharto came to power when the CIA, looking at the coup that brought him to power and the hundreds of thousands killed, CIA, no bastion of leftist thought, said this is one of the worst mass killings of the 20th century. The family called it a spiritual revolution and began sending over delegations of congressmen and oilmen who described their great spiritual prayers to Suharto, who was a Muslim. But Suharto understood what was going on, and he said, this is great. In this way, nobody converts us, but we convert ourselves. And he became one of the great beneficiaries of military aid during the Cold War, leading up to genocide in East Timor. The family never said a word. They didn't support those things. They just supported God's man. Who were they to question who God put in place